The maitre d's hand froze on the reservation book as the door creaked open. It wasn't the usual arrival, the kind with expensive perfumes and polished shoes. No, this man's presence sucked the air out of the room like a vacuum. Dirty jeans, torn coat, matted hair beneath a faded baseball cap. He reeked of smoke, sweat, and something metallic, like blood or rust. "Excuse me, sir," the maitre d' said, his voice tightening as he stepped forward. "I think you're lost." The man didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. He stepped inside the shimmering dining room of Le Chateau Lumière, New York City's most elite French restaurant, like he owned the place. And everyone noticed. Gasps rippled. Champagne flutes paused midair. Cell phones slipped into purses as heads turned. A woman in a red dress whispered to her husband, "Is this some kind of stunt?" The man walked with a limp, each step slow but deliberate. He looked around, not at the decor, not at the chandeliers or the gold leaf ceilings, but at the people. He scanned them like a soldier, surveying a battlefield. "Sir, I must ask you to leave," the maitre d' said again, firmer now, stepping into his path. The man stopped, looked him in the eye. "My name is Thomas Reeve," he said, voice dry and cracked like desert gravel. "And I'm here for dinner." The maitre d' laughed nervously. "I'm sorry. Do you have a reservation?" "No." He reached into his coat. A few people flinched, but all he pulled out was a crumpled envelope. "But someone told me I needed to come here today. Said everything would make sense." From the back, a sudden movement, a woman stood up. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Thomas," she gasped. "Thomas Reeve." He turned. Recognition sparked in his eyes, dim but rising. "Evelyn." She pushed past her table, knocking over a wine glass. The maitre d' stepped aside, confused. The room held its breath. Evelyn Langford, heiress to the Langford shipping fortune, now a philanthropist and patron of the arts, stopped inches from the man. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "It's really you," she whispered. "Last time I saw you, you were wearing braces and crying because your pony tripped on a garden hose," Thomas said with a sad smile. Tears welled in her eyes. "Where have you been all these years? War? Streets? Then nowhere." The maitre d' stepped forward again. "Madame Langford, do you know this man?" She turned sharply. "Yes. He saved my life." The maitre d' stepped back. 25 years ago, Evelyn had fallen into the icy river behind her estate. She was 7. She would have drowned if not for the teenage boy who dove in after her gardener's son. That boy had vanished weeks later. No one knew why. No one ever looked too hard. Until now. "I never got to thank you," Evelyn said, voice shaking. "Why didn't you ever come back?" Thomas looked down. "Because my dad blamed me. Said I embarrassed the family. Said I risked our job. That night, he beat me so hard I left. I didn't stop running until I was in another state." A few guests whispered. One older man even stood up. "Is this a joke?" he barked. "This is a place of class, not a shelter." Evelyn spun toward him. "That man risked his life for me when I was a child. What have you done lately, Mr. Bradley?" "Written a few checks." The room fell silent again. She turned to Thomas. "Please, sit at my table, with me." He hesitated. "Come," she said, gently taking his hand. The maitre d' had no choice but to lead them back to her private booth. As they sat, Chef Jean-Claude peeked from the kitchen. "What is going on out there?" he grumbled. "A homeless man walked in," said his sous chef, "and Madame Langford invited him to dine with her." Jean-Claude frowned. "Let me prepare something special." "You sure?" "Yes," the chef said. "If she trusts him, then so do I." Thomas barely touched his first plate. His hands trembled as he picked up the silverware. "You okay?" Evelyn asked. "I haven't used a fork in 3 years," he said softly. "I usually eat from cans. Or trash." Her eyes filled with sadness. "But it's not the food," he continued. "It's just, this feels like another planet." "Well," she said with a warm smile, "welcome back to Earth." Meanwhile, at another table, a young waitress named Clara stood frozen, her eyes locked on Thomas. "Clara," her manager hissed. "What's wrong?" That man, she whispered. I know him. He helped me once. 4 years ago. You're mistaken. No. I was in the subway. Some guy tried to grab me. That man, he stepped in. Took a beating for it. The manager's jaw dropped. Do you think he remembers you? She asked. I doubt it, Clara said. But I remember him. Another guest leaned in. That guy. He gave me his coat during a snowstorm last Christmas. I was drunk. Didn't even realize I was freezing. I thought he was a ghost. The stories spread like wildfire. One by one, guests realized they'd seen Thomas before in small moments. Random acts of kindness. No one had connected the dots. Until now, Evelyn stood up and tapped her wine glass. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, I'd like to propose a toast. All eyes turned. This man, Thomas Reeve, may look like a stranger to most of you, but to me, he's a hero, and I've just learned, to many of you, he's been an angel in the shadows. Gasps, nods. He's been homeless for over a decade, but never selfish, never cruel, always giving what little he had. Thomas looked down, eyes misty. So tonight, she said, raising her glass, we thank him. The entire room stood. Glasses lifted. A few clapped. One woman wept. Thank you, Thomas. The room echoed. But the moment was far from over. From the back, a man in a crisp navy suit approached. His face was familiar. Thomas, he said, I believe I owe you more than thanks. Thomas squinted. Do I know you? I'm Robert Kane, CEO of Kane Industries. Thomas tilted his head. You once found my daughter in a park. She was lost. You stayed with her until police came. I never found you. Thomas blinked. Well, Robert continued, I've found you now, and if you're interested, I'd like to offer you a job. A real one. Housing too. The room erupted again. No, Evelyn interrupted. He's coming to live with me. Let the man decide. Robert laughed. Thomas stared at them both, overwhelmed. His lips trembled. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Evelyn said. Say you're ready, Robert added. Thomas closed his eyes. For a moment, he saw a younger version of himself, cold, bruised, alone in an alley. That boy had given up hope. But this man was surrounded by warmth. I say, he began, his voice cracking. I say, thank you. He stood. But before I accept anything, I want to pay it forward. How? Evelyn asked. Thomas turned to the maitre d'. Do you still have that envelope? The man handed it over. Thomas opened it. Inside was a list. Names, dates. These are the people I've met over the years. Ones who helped me when I had nothing. I want them found. Thanked. Helped. Evelyn nodded. Consider it done. That night, Thomas didn't just get a meal. He got redemption. He got remembered. And everyone who saw it knew they'd witnessed something rare. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people wear the plainest faces, and the most unforgettable nights begin with a man no one expected. But even as the applause died down and the servers discreetly resumed their steps, a new tension rose quietly beneath the grandeur of the chandelier's light. Evelyn turned to Thomas, lowering her voice. You're overwhelmed. Thomas chuckled, bitter and soft. That obvious? Huh, she nodded. Let's step outside. They moved to the balcony overlooking Central Park. City lights flickering below like fireflies. The hush of the world's elite was replaced by the distant hum of traffic. The cool night air kissed their skin. You look like you haven't slept in days. Evelyn said. I haven't, Thomas replied. Not well, anyway. Too many memories, too many faces. She hesitated. Why didn't you ever try to get help? I did. At first, shelters were full, or violent. People stole my shoes while I slept. One place made me clean toilets for a week and then tossed me out because someone said I smelled. He looked at her. I got tired of asking for mercy. Evelyn's voice cracked. You didn't deserve that. Thomas turned to her. You were the first person who ever looked at me like I mattered. Even back then. She blinked back tears. That night you saved me. My parents didn't even come. It was you, always you. I'd do it again. A pause. The wind whispered. Inside, the room buzzed as guests whispered to one another. Stories resurfaced. People recalled their past encounters with him. A woman who once gave him a scarf. A man who dismissed him now recognized the silent guilt rising in his chest. Then Clara, the waitress, gathered her courage and stepped outside. "Mr. Reeve," she said. Thomas turned. "Yes." She smiled nervously. "You probably don't remember me, but you saved me once. A guy tried to grab me at West 42nd. You jumped in, took a punch to the face." He looked at her, hard. "I remember," he said. "You dropped your bag. It had a photo of your dog." Her eyes lit up. "Milo." I always remembered his name. He looked happy. Clara stepped closer. "I never got to say thank you." He looked down. "You gave me something back, a reason to act. I didn't even know why I moved that night. I just saw someone scared. You saved my life," she whispered. "I didn't even think anyone remembered my face," he said. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small chain. "A bronze medallion with a dove. I've worn this since that day. Said I'd give it to the man who saved me." She gently clipped it around his wrist. "It's yours now." Inside, Evelyn watched the moment unfold, her heart aching with quiet reverence. Suddenly, Robert Kane stepped outside too, but this time, not alone. With him was his teenage daughter, Ava. "She's the one he helped in the park," Robert explained. "I thought she should meet you." Thomas knelt slightly, smiling. "You've grown." Ava smiled back, shy. "You found me that day. I thought you were an angel." He laughed. "Far from it." She pulled something from her pocket, a child's crayon drawing. "I drew this after you left. Mom saved it. I always hoped I'd see you again." He unfolded it. Stick figures, a park bench, a big smile. His sad smile. "You kept this for years," Ava said. "You're the reason I believe people are still good." Thomas's eyes welled up, and then came another voice, gruff, loud. "I want to speak to the man who made my wife cry." Everyone turned. A tall, older man in a black tuxedo stood in the doorway. It was Mr. Bradley, the same one who scoffed earlier. Now, he looked pale, changed. "My wife just told me that you once pulled our car door open when she passed out behind the wheel. You flagged down help. You saved her life." He stepped forward, trembling slightly. "I dismissed you like garbage. I'm sorry." Thomas stood silent, his face unreadable. "You have no reason to forgive me," Bradley said. "But I needed you to hear it." "Thank you, I remember her," Thomas finally said. She had a red scarf. She looked like she was sleeping, but her lips were blue. "I just did what anyone should, but no one else did." "Mr. Bradley replied. From inside the restaurant, people began standing and slowly walking toward the balcony. Waiters, guests, the chef. Chef Jean-Claude held a silver plate. "You have not yet tasted dessert." Thomas smiled. "Is that chocolate souffle?" "With a hint of bourbon," the chef said proudly. Thomas took a bite. His eyes closed. "I haven't had anything this good since my mother's birthday cake," he whispered. People laughed gently. The tension dissolved. "Thomas," Evelyn said, "you changed this night. You changed all of us." "I didn't mean to," he replied. "Sometimes the people who change the world never mean to," Robert said. "They just do the right thing when no one's looking." A beat passed. Then Thomas turned to Evelyn. "You said earlier I could live with you." She nodded. "Yes, I meant it." He looked around. "I'll say yes, but under one condition." "Anything," she said. "I want to open something. A place. A center. Not a shelter. A place where dignity is standard. Where no one eats from a trash can again. Where people like me don't have to feel invisible." Evelyn's smile spread slowly. "We'll call it the Reeve House." "No," Thomas said. "We'll call it the Lighthouse." Everyone turned. "Because sometimes all you need," he said, looking out over the city, "is a little light to find your way back." The next 6 months moved like poetry. Thomas cut his hair, shaved, got a new wardrobe. He moved into Evelyn's guest house, but he didn't rest. He built a team, recruited social workers, therapists, chefs. Clara volunteered. Robert funded the building. Ava painted the murals. Mr. Bradley donated trucks. Chef Jean-Claude taught cooking classes. And when the lighthouse finally opened, the ribbon was cut by Thomas himself, wearing a clean gray suit, with the Dove medallion still on his wrist. CNN covered the event. The story went viral, but Thomas never let it change him. One night, months later, he returned to the spot behind the diner where he used to sleep. He left a small card taped to the wall. To the next soul who feels invisible, come find us. There's light waiting for you. TR back at the lighthouse. Dinner was served daily. Fresh linens. No questions. Just names and warmth. And on the wall above the entrance, a bronze plaque read, "In honor of the man no one saw until he showed us how to see." And so, the story of Thomas Reeve, once forgotten, once nameless, became the story that left an entire city speechless. The evening air buzzed with excitement as the crowd gathered under the twinkling lights outside the lighthouse. Camera crews, curious neighbors, ex-homeless guests, and high-profile donors filled the sidewalk. Reporters jostled for a closer angle. But Thomas wasn't on the podium. He was inside, wiping down tables, adjusting napkins, and making sure the first night went perfectly. "I thought this was your big moment," Evelyn said as she walked in, a delicate evening dress flowing like silk around her. "I'm not good with microphones," Thomas murmured, brushing a hand through his now short, clean hair. She tilted her head. "You spoke to a room full of billionaires at Le Chateau," he chuckled. "That was different. I didn't know I mattered then, now I do. And that's scarier." She walked to him, placing a hand on his arm. "You matter to more people than you'll ever realize. This place is proof. Maybe," he said softly, "but I don't want it to become about me. This place is for them, for who I used to be." Just then, a young boy peeked inside the doorway. His clothes were torn, his backpack ripped at the bottom. His eyes scanned the room nervously. Thomas crouched. "You hungry?" he asked gently. The boy nodded slowly. "What's your name?" "Deshawn." Thomas smiled. "Well, Deshawn, tonight you're our guest. Come in." He led him to a table set with clean silverware and a glass of water already waiting. A server came by and knelt next to the table. "What would you like?" "Tonight's special is spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread." Deshawn's eyes widened. "That's real food." The server smiled warmly. "Real as it gets." Thomas stood off to the side and watched. It was happening. The lighthouse was working. Behind him, Robert Kane entered, hand in hand with Ava. "Looks like you've created a miracle, Thomas." "It's not a miracle," Thomas replied. "It's just what should have always existed." Robert looked around, taking in the warmth, the simplicity, the dignity in every corner. "You know," Robert said, "I've visited hundreds of foundations. Nothing feels like this." "That's because most of them forget what it's like to have nothing," Thomas said. "They build temples with marble, not memory." A soft hand tapped Thomas's shoulder. He turned. It was Clara. "Kitchen says we've got 6 more families walking in. We may need more tables." Thomas nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "Then we set more." As the room filled, laughter bounced off the walls. Former strangers talked over steaming plates. Volunteers weaved between tables with smiles as natural as breath. At one table, an older woman named Bernice took a sip of lemonade and burst into tears. Clara rushed over. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Bernice wiped her eyes. "This was my mother's lemonade recipe. I haven't tasted it in 40 years. Clara turned to Thomas across the room. He nodded slowly. She had shared the recipe just the day before. Moments like that happened all night. A former addict stood and announced she'd been sober for 100 days. A father kissed his daughter's forehead after watching her finish a full meal for the first time in weeks. And at the center of it all, quietly floating between the tables, was Thomas, still limping slightly, still wearing the Dove medallion on his wrist, still humbler than the candles burning beside each guest. When the evening wound down and the last dish was cleaned, Thomas stepped outside into the night air. He sat on the steps, his tie loose, his shoes dusty. Evelyn sat beside him. She handed him a small photo. "What's this?" he asked. A surprise. He looked. It was a picture of him taken in secret, probably years ago. He was asleep on a bench, curled beneath a newspaper. On the back of the photo were the words, From invisible to invincible. He choked up. You're not that man anymore, she whispered. But the world needed to see he existed. You carried the weight for all of us. Thomas nodded slowly. I just wish my mom had seen this. Evelyn's smile faded. I've been meaning to tell you something. She pulled out a folded envelope. After you disappeared, she wrote letters to you every week. She never stopped. When she passed, a nurse gave me this one. She said your mother asked it be sent to me if she ever heard your name again. Thomas's hands trembled. He opened the letter. My dearest Thomas, if you ever find your way home, I hope someone shows you the kindness I couldn't. I was scared, not of you, but of losing you to a world I didn't understand. But I see now. You were always stronger than I knew. You saved that girl. You saved me. You were never a burden. You were my hero. I love you, Mom, he cried. He didn't sob, didn't wail, just silent tears that carved down his cheeks like rain over marble. Evelyn put her arm around him. That night, he slept on a bed inside the lighthouse. His first real bed in almost 2 decades, clean sheets, a soft pillow, and for the first time in years, he didn't have to keep one shoe on in case someone stole the other. He dreamed of light. A year later, the lighthouse had expanded to 3 new locations. CNN returned to do a follow-up documentary. Oprah called Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people. But Thomas refused interviews. Instead, he wrote letters to shelters, to mayors, to restaurant owners, to police precincts. Each one started the same. You don't need $1 million to change a life. You just need to look. One winter evening, a teenager named Caleb burst into the lighthouse with frost-bitten fingers and an angry look on his face. Food's free, he demanded. Yes, Thomas said, standing at the front desk. No questions asked. Caleb stared. You're Thomas Reeve. I am. You used to be like me. I still am. Caleb narrowed his eyes. You have a building. And you have fire, Thomas said. Don't waste it. Caleb ate, cried, stayed. Months later, Caleb became the lighthouse's youngest kitchen assistant. 2 years later, Thomas gave his first public speech. It was at a youth summit for at-risk teens. He walked to the stage slowly, gripping the podium with one hand. People used to cross the street to avoid me, he began. Now they cross oceans to interview me. But the truth is nothing about me changed except who was willing to look. He paused. If you've ever felt forgotten, unwanted, unseen, I was you. But light doesn't stop being light because people cover their eyes. It waits, and when they open their eyes, even for a second it shines. The auditorium rose to their feet. Thunderous applause. At 54, Thomas stood before the very restaurant that had once turned him away. Le Chateau Lumiere had invited him to a charity gala this time. As guest of honor, he wore a black suit, custom-tailored, dove medallions still on his wrist. The maitre d', not the same man as before, bowed deeply. Welcome home, Mr. Reeve. Inside, the same chandelier sparkled above, but the people had changed. Evelyn sat at his side. Clara brought his wine. Chef Jean-Claude had retired, but left a note on the menu. Tonight's soufflé is for TR, the man who taught us all to see. And across the room, at table 7, a young woman whispered to her date, Who's that? Her date smiled. That's Thomas Reeve, the man who walked in from the street and walked out with the whole city behind him. And in that moment, as laughter filled the air and music played gently in the background, the world was not just reminded of Thomas. It was reminded of kindness, of second chances, of dignity, of light. 5 years later, the name The Lighthouse was known in every major city. There were 22 branches across the country. Not a single one bore Thomas's face on the walls. He'd insisted. This isn't about legacy, he always said. It's about lives. But the lives changed were countless. Caleb, the angry teenager with frostbitten fingers, was now managing the Chicago branch. Clara became the national director of community outreach. Robert Kane had stepped down from Kane Industries to become a full-time philanthropist for urban development. And Evelyn, She and Thomas had grown inseparable, not in the romantic way tabloids speculated, but in the quiet, unbreakable bond between two souls who had shared trauma, triumph, and truth. They were family. One afternoon, Thomas stood in front of a crowd at a high school auditorium in Harlem. He was older now. A few strands of silver kissed his temples. His hands were weathered but steady. He looked out at the teenagers, some slouched, others skeptical. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "Another speaker. Another adult telling you to be better." A few chuckled. "I lived in the alleys behind liquor stores. I drank rainwater out of trash lids. I begged. I stole food to survive. I lost teeth from fights. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a person, I saw a problem." Silence fell. But the world doesn't change when you get handed everything. It changes when someone sees you, even when you don't see yourself. He held up the dove medallion still hanging from his wrist. "This was given to me by someone I saved without knowing it, and it saved me back." He looked around the room. "You don't need to save the world. Just don't stop seeing it, especially the parts others ignore." He stepped back from the mic. The room stood. A standing ovation from kids who had never clapped for anyone in their lives. Outside, as Thomas walked to his car, he noticed a girl sitting on the curb alone, face streaked with tears. He paused, sat beside her. "Want to talk?" he asked. "No," she said, barely a whisper. "Okay," he replied. "Want to sit in silence?" She nodded. They sat. Minutes passed. Then she spoke. "My brother ODD last week. I feel like I'm not real anymore." Thomas didn't give a speech. He didn't say things will get better. He just put a hand gently on her shoulder. "You are real," he said, "and you're not alone." She looked at him for the first time. "Who are you?" He smiled. "Someone who used to sit where you're sitting." She gave a shaky laugh. "They said, you're famous or something." He chuckled. "I'm just a man who remembers." She wiped her face. "Thank you. You don't owe me anything," he said. "But someday, when you're strong again, pass this moment on. That's the only thing I ask." 10 years after the night at Le Chateau, Thomas Reeves stood at the front of a chapel. Not in a casket, not on a podium, but in the audience clapping because Evelyn had just been honored for her lifetime of service. After the ceremony, she leaned toward him. Playful. "We're getting old," she teased. "You're getting wiser." He grinned. "I'm just getting slower." They both laughed. "Ever regret not going back to your old life?" she asked. He thought about it. The mansions, the missed family, the path not taken. "No," he said. "I didn't lose my life. I found it." One quiet evening, Thomas sat alone on the balcony of the Lighthouse's New York branch, the very first. The city pulsed below. Soft music floated from inside. He sipped tea. He never drank anything stronger. He looked down at the medallion on his wrist, rubbed it gently. It had dulled over time, but he never took it off. A young man approached from behind. "Mr. Reeve?" he asked. Thomas turned. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "I don't know. Just thank you. You gave me a place when the world shut every door." Thomas smiled softly. "That's why it's open. Can I sit with you, please?" They watched the lights together. And just like that first night, when Thomas had been invited in out of the cold, the circle closed. Not with fanfare, not with fortune, but with fire kept alive. When Thomas Reeve passed away, years later in his sleep, peacefully at the lighthouse, the news traveled the world. CNN, BBC, schools, churches, shelters, politicians. The funeral wasn't held in a cathedral or private estate. It was held at the lighthouse. Every branch closed for a day. Thousands came, many who had once been homeless, addicted, abused, forgotten. Each carried something, a card, a photo, a piece of his legacy. Clara delivered the eulogy. "Thomas Reeve didn't build an empire," she said. "He built a bridge for people like me, like all of us." Ava, now a social worker herself, added, "He didn't tell us to shine. He reminded us we already did." And on the wall behind her, the original plaque was updated with one final line: "Thomas Reeve, the man who lit 1,000 lighthouses, but never needed one named after him." Somewhere, a young girl runs into a lighthouse in a different city, rain-soaked, hungry, afraid. A volunteer greets her. "You're safe now," he says. "Come inside." And she sees a photo on the wall. A man with kind eyes, a soft smile, a dove on his wrist. "Who's that?" she asks. The volunteer replies with a reverence normally reserved for kings. "That is the man who showed the world that no one is invisible, and even in death." Thomas Reeve continued to leave everyone speechless.